candid conversations, unfiltered opinions, and humor with Avag Beck's podcast.
Hello, welcome everybody. So today I have the pleasure of having with us Dr. Elizabeth Freed. Elizabeth is a retired executive coach. She's a model, she's an actor, and she's said newly, but I don't know. She's a children's book author. Okay. She began this journey. That's all that matters. So we're going to talk about her journey alive. And she sounds like she lived a fulfilled life, something most of us aspire to have. So if you're a woman, if you're somebody who's looking to make an impact or be satisfied, that's self-actualization of sort. When you get to a certain point of your life, this is a great episode to listen to. Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome.
Hi, how are you? One of the things that I also do, very much so, is I'm a medium, where I connect people with departed loved ones to bring forth healing and empowering messages, something that is relatively recent in my life, which I'll address later.
To hear that. I love mediums as somebody with departed loved ones. I love the special work that mediums do. And we'll delve into that. That is so exciting to hear. So yes, you said that it's recent. I want to talk about that a little bit before we get into the other things. What I find with clairvoyants or people with a gift is that they've had this gift all along, but they ignore it until they can't ignore it anymore. Was this the case with you?
Absolutely not.
Wow.
I had a few experiences, once in my 20s and once again in my late 30s, but I was busy running a business, explored it, I looked into it, and I said, I don't have time for this. So, and I'm very left-brained, very corporate. All right. So for me to go pursue something like this would be, people would think I was nuts. I would lose my credibility as an executive coach. I wasn't going there. First of all, I thought you had to be natural at doing this. I am not a natural medium. I am a medium by choice. And this happened after I retired. I wanted to explore my spiritual side further. I now had the time to do it. And I saw at the Monroe Institute, it said the Mediumship Toolkit. And I went, that's interesting. I don't know much about that. I've never been to a medium, so let's see what that's about. Then I thought I need to be a natural, someone like Teresa Caputo or something. So I went to this a week-long retreat, and I said, this is very interesting. I want to explore this further. I wasn't very good initially, but I was undaunted. I wanted to learn. And really, anybody can be a medium. Everybody has the capabilities to do it. It's a matter of education, meditation, and practice, 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 practice. I still practice. All mediums continue to practice, evolve, develop, unfold. And I tell you, after I took that course, I realized I needed more. I probably have what would be equivalent to a master's degree in mediumship with all the courses that I took and still continue to take and still continue to practice. Yeah. It's evolving always.
Thank you for that insight. Most of the mediums that I've encountered are usually almost natural. You mentioned Teresa. Teresa's journey I followed. It's quite interesting to hear this bit as well. Thank you for sharing. So let's talk
Any of
about
your listeners out there, if they're interested, they too
right?
can explore this and refine it. It's certainly possible. It's a matter of commitment.
Yeah. It's like everything, practice, practice, practice. It's a craft. You have to
Right.
better your craft so you can be halfway good at it or great at it. So thanks for sharing that. So you talked about being incredibly left brain. So let's talk about your corporate career. So how did you get started in corporate? What was the pull for you to go to the point of even being an executive coach? Because by the time you get to executive coaching, you understand the C-suite and above. So how was that journey for you?
Well, it was a meandering path and it wasn't planned, totally unplanned. I'd like to tell you, well, I have my career path and it was planned, planned, planned. I started out in education as a teacher and I actually taught in in delinquent place for kids, a placement for delinquent kids or foster kids and so forth. And it was very unrewarding. So I went into the public school system, and then I taught junior high school, and then I taught high school, and I taught in a hard to reach, hard to teach inner city school and tried to be as creative as I could be. But I found the entire environment very ungratifying to me. And I felt like I wasn't very good. Now, that's not true because I won awards, but I personally, women never think they're enough. Okay. So a friend of mine said, have you thought about getting a master's degree? She said, my advisor's really great. And I thought, well, I might want to go to law school. I might want to go into the Air Force. Well, I flunked the math test on the Air Force. Didn't work. So, and then the law school thing didn't work out for me. And so I said, all right, well, let me check it out. Well, this woman who was the advisor, we clicked. And she offered me an internship. So I taught at the Ohio State University. And that's how I got my master's in a year like that. So then I thought, oh, well, I'll go get another teaching job is what I thought. And she said, I really think your doctoral student quality was the furthest thing from my mind. I came from a very modest family, and they weren't highly educated, very blue collar. So she said, there's a fellowship that's being offered. Why don't you apply for it, and I'll recommend you. So I did, and I got it. So then I did that. And my intention was to be a teacher educator at that time. And I was very disappointed with the whole process that I went through. I found that at that time, it's not so much today, but at that time, the students weren't the customer. It was all about the professors and the whole thing. And they were very pompous. And I used to ask a lot of questions, and they'd get irritated with me. I thought universities where you challenged your mind and that's what you did. Well, no, I didn't want to be challenged. And I just said, I don't think I want to be around this environment. This is not for me. But when I was doing an internship, I did an internship on corporate training programs, which interested me. So I thought, well, maybe I could transfer my educational background into a corporate environment. And while I was working on my dissertation, one of the companies that I was using as my subjects liked my topic, and they were very enthralled with what it was I was doing. It had to do with vocational education and word processing when it was very new, before there were individual PCs. And they asked me if I wanted to come to the company and work in their systems department. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, I struck a deal with them, always negotiating. And I said, I'll do it if two things. You give me the time off when I need to do my defense of my dissertation and so forth, and type my dissertation for me. So I got that done. And I said, and I'll only stay a year. And then I want to teach at a university. This is what I thought initially. Well, I liked it. And I wanted to get into human resources in the training and development department, but there was nothing available to me at that time. Plus, because I asked a lot of questions, I immediately got marked to be a troublemaker. And in a corporate environment, in that particular corporate environment, was not looked upon with joy, so to speak. So I was always questioning things. They wanted me to go along to get along. So not my nature. So I just later learned how I didn't have to be political, but politically sensitive. So I learned how to dodge and dart and jump the hoops and walk the steps and do whatever it was that I needed to do. And eventually I got a job. I moved. There was nothing available in human resources except in compensation. And I became a compensation analyst. And the tracking was, when you do compensation, you have to do job analysis so that you can understand the skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions of the job so that you can determine the pay rates. Well, in education, when you are doing training, you have to do a job analysis so that you can sequence and scope the skills that are necessary to train on a particular job. So the concepts were the same. The application was different. In compensation, you're applying it to money. In my case, I was applying it to training, but the concepts and the process was the same. So I got involved in compensation. I really didn't really like it. But what happened was, because I was this sort of very outspoken woman, there was a problem in the company in which the way they paid their secretaries. They paid their secretaries by who they reported to and not by what they did. Well, we found out this was quite inequitable, and people complained about it in the file since 1964. All right. And nobody would touch it because there were always males, and I was one of the first females in that position. Nobody would touch it. So they thought, oh, well, let's give it to Elizabeth because she always gets in trouble and we'll probably fire her anyway. So I said, okay, let's look into that. And I created a study in which to look at that. Now, that did a couple things for me. And I should explain to you that there was quite a bit of hesitation because these secretaries would hitch their wagon to a star. So if somebody was a manager, you were maybe a grade class 5. If you were a director, you were class 6. So your grade went up depending on who you reported to. Now, everybody used their secretaries differently. Some used them to do project work, and some used them as standard. Let me open the mail and sort it for me. And as you reported to a director, you got paid the same, irrespective of what you were doing. And that was really quite unfair. But nobody wanted to touch it because these bosses at the time, they'd have their secretaries do some of their personal things, manage their checkbook, do things like that. And they also didn't want to have any problems with these women that were working for them. And yes, they were women primarily. Excuse me. So I created this study. And the way I did this study is I interviewed all of these executives and their secretaries jointly. This gave me major exposure in the company. And also, I needed to create grassroots with these secretaries, depending on what it was that I was learning, and credibility with them. As a result of this study, I got exposure to the highest levels in the organization. And that's what happened there. Also in compensation, there I got involved in designing sales compensation programs and other things where in order to design compensation programs, you have to understand the business end of the business. And as a result of that, this particular company I worked for was very diversified. It was an insurance company, but they owned radio stations. They had a development company. There was all different companies. So I learned a lot about a lot. And I never wanted to stay there. I thought this is not an environment for me because they were like not very forward thinking, very conservative. So I said, all right, I'm going to learn as much as I can in the shortest period that I can. And I got promoted. And then eventually, after 5 years, I said, time to start my own business. So I started my own compensation consulting business. Did that for about 15, 20 years. Never really liked it, but it was very lucrative. What it did for me, however, is it enabled me to understand business so that when eventually I got involved in executive coaching, what separated me from other executive coaches was the kinds of questions that I asked. That very thing that got me into so much trouble when I was younger is the thing that sold me to executives because when they talked to me, I would ask them very deep questions. I affectionately know by my clients as the heat-seeking missile, right for the issues. Consequently, that's how I got into executive coaching and built my credibility. So it was a long and involved story, but there is no quick way to get there. All a lot of hard work. And then I did executive coaching for about 20 years. I still will take one assignment a year if it's interesting. If it's a meat potatoes assignment like this guy needs to, or this gal needs some simple thing, I pass that on to somebody else. I want stuff that excites me, that is challenging to me at this stage in my life. Otherwise, I'd rather play pickleball or travel.
That's the life. So, is there anything you've been around the executive industry, the corporate industry for a while? You mentioned your experience as a salary analyst or compensation analyst, I should say. and then the executive coaching bit. And, you've grown through corporate America. Is there anything that on the positive side you've seen has changed for the better? And things that have remained the same. Because in telling those stories, there are things that I know women are still experiencing today in the corporate world. Is there a thing, or are there things that you feel has changed over time, or things that have remained the same?
That's an excellent question. And let me just respond to you by saying I was a woman first. There were people in that company that wanted to torpedo my ship. They wanted to give me misinformation so that I would fail. I thought, bring it on, boys. Come on, because that's me. But I learned that was not going to get me where I needed to go. I thought, you know what? You all see, I came in there with a doctorate degree, and most of the men there did not have that, like 99% of it. So I was an immediate threat to them. They had no women in management roles when I was there. I eventually became the compensation manager. The women in HR, well, they were the ones that were like in activities. They brought the watermelon to the picnic. All right. So that was that. Since that time, I've seen that company get a vice president of HR as a woman and so forth. And many, many things happen, and many, many more women have infiltrated that organization. They've come along. The thing is that in certain industries, there's still a lot of resistance to women. And I coach women on how to navigate those waters. I had no mentors. So here I was being this aggressive, outspoken woman. Well, that just didn't get me where I learned how to play the game, to get exactly done what I needed to have done, to navigate those waters. It took a while and I stepped on a lot of toes, but I learned it. And as a result of that, I've learned how to ask those questions in ways that do not offend, in ways that boost the esteem of the person that I'm talking to and preserve it, and still get my point across and influence in a way. Now, many women don't know this, or they're not assertive enough to know how to go about it. Um, I used to see as a woman, I would work so hard, and women typically have to have 98, 99% of the information before they'll make a decision or talk about it. A man could take a thimbleful of knowledge and turn it into a bucket full of BS in a heartbeat. So what women need to do is they needed to understand that you don't have to have 99%, that you can go forward. And that's confidence issue. So I have worked with women executives to help them do this. I remember helping one woman and she just said, how do you know all of these things? I said, because I lived through that war. It was a war. That's all I can say. So there are some things that continue to happen. And I think in some cases you're finding women being more supportive of other women. When I was going through it, women have a tendency to want to level the playing field. It goes back to who does she think she is, that she can blah, blah, blah. They're now, and I find this with women that are older, that they understand now that they are there to support each other, and I have seen changes in that. I've seen a lot of changes in that because there was so much jealousy, so much cattiness, not so much, at least for me personally. I don't know what it's like for younger.
You mentioned a few things that I really want to kind of really touch on. And the one thing you said is you didn't mean to be offensive. However, people did take offense. Or you didn't mean to be abrasive. However, that's how it was perceived. And this is something that is very common, especially with women in the workplace. You're either aggressive or bossy, or you don't know your place. All these things, and that especially compounds for women that look like me. So, and when you try to not be political, like you say, understand the political landscape, sometimes you're accused by women who are expecting you to go guns blazing of fitting in or trying to be one of the boys. So how do you balance that where you have your career, you have your goals, you understand what you're up against, and you're regulating yourself where you have either longevity or the experience, but at the same time, maybe the cattiness or maybe criticism, whatever it is, how do you navigate a landscape that is not as supportive with even the people you're advocating for? And then you have an uphill battle with the people that you're trying to get a buy-in into whatever it is that your impact that you're trying to sell.
Those are very insightful observations. Part of it is being more interested than interesting and asking the right questions and building relationships before charging in and giving your opinions. That's the key. So one has to have conversations and build relationships. I was so busy in my youth being competent that I didn't understand the importance of building relationships, because when you build relationships, then you're able to influence and become trusted. So as a woman, I'll give you an example as I was thinking and listening to your questions. When I was in the compensation role, was just recently promoted to manager, and I was in a major meeting, the only woman there. I had to deal with a couple of things. In my youth, I just didn't realize what I looked like. I was so focused on my work, and I used to wear my hair in a braided bun with big, gigantic glasses and, dressed hermetically because I didn't want anyone to look at me as a woman. I wanted them to look at my brain, not at my boobs, okay? So that was the thing. So I go to this meeting, and we had recently had designed a sales compensation plan. And they had invited in all the regional sales managers and vice presidents of the region, and there were like 40 people there. I'm the only woman. And so I'm sitting at a table, and well, before I did, this one man came up to me and he said, "Well, hello, and who are you?" And of course, you want to gag yourself when that happens. And I said, "Hi, I'm Elizabeth Reed. And what do you do for us, Elizabeth?" I'm the compensation planning manager. Compensation. I'm just going to have to get to know you. He puts his arm around me. I love people in compensation. So I am trying everything to just stay calm. And now we're sitting across the table at dinner, and he says to me, "So what got you interested in the company?" And I said, "Well, I was doing some work, and they invited me to join when I was in graduate school." I had learned at this point, I didn't tell people I had a PhD because it was too intimidating. So he said, "Were you working on your master's?" And I thought he asked me a direct question. And so I answered honestly. I said, "No, I was working on my doctorate." And he said, "In what area?" And I didn't say, "Well, it was in business education with a minor in statistics." I didn't say business and minor in statistics. I thought, "Oh boy, that's going to kill me." I'm learning, see, at this stage. So I thought, in education. And I thought that would kind of calm me. Because, "Oh, I have a daughter in education. She works with learning disabled kids." And I said, "Well, you should be very proud of your daughter, because there is a tremendous need in helping special needs students, and she'll make quite a contribution." I thought I was off the hook, that he'd leave me alone now, because I was trying to connect. But this guy, when I said I was working on my PhD, he literally backed away from it. I mean, just literally backed away from the desk. And then the what area? Then, after I made my statement, he said, "So, what makes you think you could be a manager in this company?" Bang, out of nowhere. "You think you could be a manager?" So I said, yes, I think I can be. And I heard my voice. He is coming at me. And here's the thing. Every man around the table was just sitting there in rapt attention, watching this. And he is just bang, bang, attacking me. And I'm thinking, this is where I said a little prayer. I said, God, help me out of this and help me out of this smelling like a rose. This was the first lesson. And the answer came. And I said, you know, Bill, I think your daughter would be very upset with you right now. My daughter, what does she have to do with this? I said, I'd like you to imagine for a moment your daughter in the business situation that we're in right now and dealing with this level of abuse. Now, what did that do? He saw me as a stranger. I brought him into people he knew and loved and made him realize his behavior without directly attacking him. Okay. And then it just silenced him. And then I just turned around and talked to somebody else. I didn't say, you're being a real jerk. I brought his daughter into it. Now, that wasn't the end of it. The next day, we were in the boardroom, and this is your classic mahogany row, 30 people at a giant table. And of course, the only seat that was available when I entered was the one next to my friend Bill. I sat down, being professional as always, and said, well, good morning, Bill. How are you? And we sat down, and the meeting began. Now, this is the lesson I learned. I'm listening to this conversation, and they're making statements I know are just flat out wrong. And instead of saying, wait a minute, you guys are off track, which is what I wanted to do, raised my hand, and I said, I have a question, and it may appear fundamental. I'm new in this role as a manager and just took over this project, and you folks have been working on it for the past year. I just have a couple questions I need to understand. If they seem fundamental, would you indulge me? Whole different approach. Why, of course, Elizabeth. Now they can be helpful. All right. Well, and it seems to me that if we're doing a compensation plan, would it be correct to assume that it is supposed to support the overall business strategy? Would that be correct? Yes, that's right. Well, if that's correct, would the following be correct? And I ask another question. Of course, I knew the answers to all of these things. So why then, I said, if that's the case, I think we've done a major disservice to Bill over here. The guy said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you just said to me that what I raised was the crux of the issue. And Bill over here raised that very point 5 minutes ago, and we overlooked it. I think we need to revisit his comment and explore it further. Now, here's Bill asking, why am I a manager in the company? I'm the only one that recognized his brilliance, supported him despite his behavior, and made him look good. And I got to make my point without anybody really realizing what I had done. And so I thought, oh boy, this is going to be fun. And then I decided to have fun with it. So I did not make myself available for lunch because I knew he'd be on me in a second. So I just wanted him to sweat a little longer. Okay. So by the end of the day, he came up to me and he said, you know, Elizabeth, I owe you a major apology. I don't understand why I attacked you last night. I hadn't even been drinking. I said, Bill, you were not used to working with a woman. It was not unfamiliar to you. It's okay. He said, well, I didn't sleep very well last night. And I said, I didn't think you would. But that's okay. We both learned something. He said, I just was so wrong in doing this. I said, well, let me ask you something. I said, one of the initiatives of the company is to promote women into district sales managers position. And you're a regional sales manager. They need mentors to help them. Can I count on you to be part of that team to help bring women up? He said, you got it. That is what I learned. But I had no one to teach that to me. That's the kind of stuff that when I have women bring it to me, I help them navigate it. I wished I had someone who could have said to me, "This is how you handle it." I had to learn it just through my own scrappiness and to learn to tone it down. I still was assertive, but it's how I did it. And it's so against my nature because my nature is to be very direct. But I learned, what is you attract a lot more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. Well, that's the truth. Okay? That is the truth. So that's the story. Does that help you understand?
Thank you for telling that story. I've had to learn hard lessons, stepped on toes and foots and knees, all of that. So at the end of the day, the scenario of talking about your education and having to hold back on that, people may be listening to this is like, well, that's your accomplishment. If it rubs him wrong, it rubs him wrong. You have to talk about it. It doesn't change the accomplishment. So whether I stand on a hilltop and scream that I have this level of education, but a major in this, a minor in this, and this on top of this and that, or I tell you I'm a college graduate, it doesn't change my qualification. It doesn't change my education. However, if it's important that I get your audience without having to put up a barrier very quickly because you are uncomfortable with what you feel I've accomplished, then it defeats the whole purpose of even engaging you in a conversation. That is something that I've learned to do. It doesn't change what you have. If it's important for you to talk to a person or establish any kind of connection with a person, sometimes it's good to meet people at that human level first. Let them find out later. I usually love that. It's like, oh my goodness, why didn't you say all of this? It wasn't important.
Right.
It wasn't important. It was important for you and I to meet, for me to get to know you, and I'm being on a human level, and then we'll go there. Uh, Something that most women don't understand or know is that as a woman, you possess a certain level of skills and powers that a man may not necessarily have. And then it almost always shocks some women to find out that they're intimidating, especially with the accomplishment. Have you found out that to be true in your coaching? I don't know if it's humility. I don't know if it's society's imprint on women that you should be seen and not heard. I don't know what it is. But some women sometimes get surprised that men, or even some women, could be intimidated by them, the way they carry themselves, or even the accomplishment.
Well, what an astute observation. I don't have to say a word. It took me a while to understand that because I stand tall. I will walk into a department store and they say, "You look like you're a woman on a mission," because 'cause I'm focused, all right? It's an interesting thing is, I don't wanna dim my light. What was it? Marianne Williamson said, "You don't need to be small." You don't need to do this because it's other people that they try to dim your light for you. There's a middle ground there, and I think you're so right in understanding that you need to establish that relationship first before you talk about your accomplishments and what you can do for people. You find out what are their pain points, what are they interested in? You look for ways for you to connect. And there's from a neuroscience perspective, when you build those connections, you increase something called oxytocin. When you increase oxytocin, it allows your brain to relax and the defenses to come down. So you want to get to know somebody, as you say, it allows you to bond, it allows you to be more open with each other. Now, as a coach, when I have to sell my services, or I used to have to sell my services, I want clients to be with me and choose to be with me because they are comfortable. I modify my behavior based on the style of the person that I'm talking to. But that's not compromising who I am. It's how people need to be received. So if someone is more analytical and they're quieter and they need a certain type of approach, then I'll speak to them in the language that they understand. I had one woman I was coaching, and she said to me, "Well, why do I have to change for everybody else?" And she was very irritated. She had been working in the prison system, and she saw it as being manipulative doing this because she said prisoners would manipulate and they would try to do this. I go, "Look, let's put it on it. Do you like to entertain?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "And when your guests come to see you, do you only serve them one type of beverage?" And she said, "Well, no. I have soft drinks, I have water, I have beer, I have wine." And I said, "And you base that on what?" She said, "Well, whatever they like." And I said, "Well, why did you do that?" "Because I'm hosting them. I want my guests to feel comfortable." I said, "Really? You're not manipulating your guests?" I had to give her an analogy like that. So she could I said, "All you're doing when you're talking to people in different ways is appreciating what their needs are. You're not manipulating them, you're honoring them. There's a difference." So it's all in how you
That
frame it.
yeah, it's such a great analogy.
And it doesn't make
Such a
you
great analogy.
feel like you've cheapened yourself, okay? You're not cheapening yourself, you're honoring the other person. That's all. I see
Yeah.
that's resonating with you.
It is. I had to learn that the hard way. I really did. Because I'm a person that I believe I'm very sure of myself. Having to understand that although I'm not looking to intimidate or present a certain way, I can't help the perception. And because the perception happened and it wasn't my intention, and I believed, talking about younger days, I believed because I didn't cause you to have that perception, that's your problem. I think with maturity, I've gotten to a place that, okay, the perception is there. How am I presenting? I'm not dimming my light. I'm not putting myself under a bushel. However, how am I presenting to either strengthen that perception or soften it? I can't change your perception. I cannot. However, I can regulate how I present.
Absolutely.
And it took a while. It took a while to have that understanding, and it is growth. It is definitely growth. Yeah, it's manipulation or fitting in. If you're not a person that has that natural, I have to fit in, I have to be small, or I have to whatever, it's hard to regulate or kind of like have that a different perspective. When you said that, I didn't quite think of that analogy, but it makes sense how I saw myself when I stepped back and then looked. It's not conforming, it's not fitting in, is not being palatable. It is to a sense, but it's basically understanding what I'm putting out. So yeah,
Well, another way of dealing with this and another technique that I use is something called stipulation. Lawyers stipulate. They say, "Okay, these are the facts." You put it out there on the table, okay?
right.
So if you say to somebody, let me think about this. I wanna just stipulate something. I know that it can be intimidating to have to enter a coaching situation, and it can be overwhelming and sometimes makes you uncomfortable. So let's just put that out on the table and talk about what I can do to increase your comfort level. So you're recognizing that it may be out there, and then you're asking for feedback. Now that makes you more human also. So that aspect of stipulation, but it's just whenever there's an issue, you just say, "This is the issue, so how would you like to deal with it?" I ask a question in one of the intake forms that I do with coaching is, "How would you like to be coached? What are things that you hear that others tell you that make you uncomfortable? How can I best help you address some of these things? How would you like me to tell you? Be gentle with me." Don't just be in my face. Now, I do pro bono coaching for an organization called the Honor Foundation, where we coach Navy's military special operators, Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, Delta Force, Green Berets, Army Rangers, those people. They're used to hearing it directly. They don't want anybody to dance around them, but I always ask the question.
Right. So you still found yourself back into the military somehow, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I did. It's so funny. I wanted to do that. But I didn't understand there was nobody in my family that was really in the military. And I applied to the officer school. I got like in the 99th percentile for verbal and like I don't know where in the math because it just didn't work. So I didn't make it, but that I didn't know you could enlist. I didn't understand that. I didn't know enough about it. I didn't have any guidance when I was growing up in terms of career. My guidance was find a husband, let him take care of you. That's the guidance I got. And I said, I do not want to be beholden to any man for anything ever.
A solid career guide, sorry, advice for women in those days,
Yeah.
and still today. Well, just the world we live in. Something I wanted to ask you. So I know we've talked about coaching, executive coaching. Have you ever had women founders in the founders page, entrepreneur, who need coaching as well? Because when we talk about coaching, the focus is usually on corporate America. However, starting a business is equally an uncharted territory, especially if you don't have people in your family to kind of guide you, or friends, or supports of any kind. So have you coached founders, especially in industry that um, now we're seeing a lot of women? Technology is one of those. Finance is another. So, what has been your experience with coaching women at all in the founder space?
Have a woman that's in the energy space.
Mm,
I'm going to say she's in the cow shit business. Now, let me explain. This is a company. Her background is the dairy industry, and this is a company that takes cow manure, works with farmers to build plants on their property, to dry and sterilize this manure. In the process of doing that, it produces methane gas that can be used for renewable energy. What's left over with the manure is then used for either bedding in stalls or for fertilizer. Fantastic, wonderful, renewable energy kind of thing. And she's in this kind of business that is very competitive. The oil and gas industry is primarily male. All right. And what she brings to the table is that she has been involved with the dairy farmers for many, many years and has great relationships with them. So she can bring them and create that and establish relationships with the dairy farmers to encourage them to allow this company to build their plants and work with them, et cetera, et cetera. Well, she is eclipsed by the engineers and the others who are all male oriented, and it's very challenging for her to get her voice. And so, yes, I've worked with people like that to help them deal in a primarily male dominated industry. And she is one of the founders of this company because her worth is the relationship she has with the farmers, and that's the value of that. And so how do you leverage and parlay your worth and still be heard when you're dealing with very strong egomaniacal kind of individuals on the team? So that's the kind of thing that my background and experience helps with, because I dealt with the same thing in my younger days, and making sure you're heard. And she's extremely smart and extremely capable, but it can be intimidating and off-putting to be in that environment. It's very challenging to not be heard for your contribution.
yeah. Thank you for that. A lot of women in the founder space, especially in a competitive or male-dominated industry. Navigating those landscapes usually comes with a set of challenges. You're charting a territory of being a founder, which is challenging on its own. And then you're also managing emotions, you're managing relationships, you're managing egos, which sometimes need to be checked, but oftentimes go unchecked. So it's quite a balancing act. And that's why I love ecosystems where women support one another, especially in these environments. Communication, you don't mean to be intimidating, but somebody who knows they don't have the qualifications you have or relationships you have is definitely going to be rubbed the wrong way. How do you manage that? Yes, you didn't intend to. You just exist. You still have to manage it, as opposed to, well, that's your problem, figure it out. It doesn't usually bode well. So let's talk about your acting and modeling career, and then we'll talk about this children's book authorship journey. So how did you get into acting and modeling? How did that fall into your lap with so much that you were managing?
Again, not planned. When dealing in executive coaching, some of the things that happen with executives is that they are unable to be in the moment, in present. So I had attended a conference, and this guy was talking about improvisation and how it can be used to help executives if they take improv courses, because you have to be in the moment for improv to respond. It helps them be more in the moment. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Let me explore that. Before I can recommend it, let me take it myself. So I took 2 or 3 improv courses. And in the process, I was the oldest person there. One of the young women who was in college said to me, "I'm in a film class, and we have a role that I think you would be ideal for." I said, "Look, I'm not an actor. I don't know anything about acting." And she says, "Really, I've seen you, and I think you would be perfect." I said, "I don't know." And she said, and she's trying to convince me. I said, "Well, what's your role with this film?" She goes, "Well, I'm the casting director." I said, "So you're getting graded on the people that you bring in?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "If it will help you, because I'm always of service, if it will help you to have me audition and that will help your grade, I'll do it for you." So she said, "Yes, I'd really appreciate it." So I did it. I met with the director. They liked me and they wanted to use me, but then they couldn't get the funding, and so it never happened. But that kind of got me thinking, that's kind of interesting. And so I decided I wanted to learn more about this. So I signed up with one of these services and did what I needed to do. And I worked on student films for free. I didn't know anything about it. And of course, the first thing I got was the lead in a student film where I was this grandma who was suffering from early onset dementia and was also homophobic. And her grandson was coming to tell her that he was getting married to his partner and that he was homosexual. And he walks into her and she's like not paying attention. She's out of it. So there were a lot of lines, and I wasn't accustomed to memorizing lines. And then there's lines and blocking, because while I'm talking, I have to be doing things. This was hard, and I had no one to help me. And so I managed to get through it, and I managed to do an okay job. And then I did several other things, and I learned about lighting and sound and just how you do stuff. And I said, well, this is really cool. I enjoyed it, and I was helping students. I saw it as me helping them, and it was allowing me to do something creative. And then it got to a point where I kept getting these lead roles as grandma or whatever. I could not memorize the lines. There were too many lines. It was too hard for me. I'm starting to stress myself out. And I said, wait a minute, I'm doing this for fun. I'm into retirement. This is supposed to be fun. I'm thinking, if I don't do a good job, their grade's going to be impacted. I don't want that responsibility. So that's when I decided no films, not doing films. But what I will do is commercials. Maybe I'll have a line and maybe I get lucky and there's no lines. So that I can do. I can do expressions. I can do a variety of things, but I didn't want to be in film. So I will do commercials or print work that have either limited lines or no lines, which is good. The problem is with doing this work is I live in San Diego and most of the work is in Los Angeles. And that's a 2-hour unpleasant drive for me. And I will not go to auditions in person. So I would audition over Zoom. If they want a call back, I'm not coming in for a call back. So I'm in there with 5 other people and they go, oh, no, thanks. That I drove 2 hours and 2 hours back. No. So I limit what I do to those people that will take my auditions over Zoom and will do the callbacks over Zoom. And I've had some very nice things that happen. Not often, though, very limited because A, the competition is stiff, and 2, I limit my availability because I won't come in. It's like at the end of the day, you're lucky to make $10 an hour when I think about driving back and forth and whatever, but I was doing it for fun. So I just do that on occasion, maybe do 2, 3 a year at the most. I've done stuff for Apple and News. There's Prime and Netflix. God, but that's a senior moment for me. I've done stuff like that, which has been fun. But then I said to myself, I need to find and that's when I started looking for something else that could add to my creativity, to my spirituality. My whole purpose in life is to be of service. So I wanted to do something to be of service. I have the Honor Foundation that I did it that way. And then I wanted to go into delving more into my spirituality, which led me into mediumship, which is where I am also of service because everything I earn as a medium gets donated directly to the Honor Foundation, the nonprofit military transition organization that I serve. So it's been a nice circular way for me to do that.
Thank you. What was your inspiration behind writing a children's book?
All right. While I was meditating, it's all connected. Everything's connected. So part of preparing for meditation, for mediumship, is to meditate every day. So I was meditating and I got a memory that came up of myself as a child. And when I was between the ages of 4 and 6, I had this experience. My mother was very old school, old country. And I would want to go out and play, and I'd been playing all day, and then I'd want to go out again. You don't need to go out again. You've had enough good time. It's time for you to learn how to be by yourself and entertain yourself. There's not always going to be people around to entertain you, so you might as well learn now. 4 to 6 years old. So get a book and read a book, or look at a magazine, or do your coloring book, or whatever. So I was like flipping through magazines, and I'd look at the pictures. Bored out of my mind when I'm a kid. And I noticed that the picture would take a shimmering, and the next thing I knew, I was in that picture. I was interacting with the people in that picture. Now, was this my imagination? Did it really happen to me? I don't know, because I was between 4 and 6, and kids' brains at that time, I don't know. And I do remember that I enjoyed it, and it entertained me. But by the time I went off to elementary school, maybe in the 1st grade, I could no longer do it because my brain, and I never told anybody because I would have gotten this right. Oh, it's just your imagination. That didn't really happen. Anytime I want to do anything creative, be practical. So I forgot about that experience. And then I started thinking about it and I said, I wonder if there are other children that might like to know about this, that might like to explore these adventures. Why don't I just talk about a little girl who looks at pictures? She doesn't have to be 4 to 6. Maybe she's older. And she gets pulled into a picture and goes into all of these adventures when this happens to her. And then let's make it so that she learns things from these adventures. She has some meaning. She learns friendship and trust and courage and responsibility and those kinds of things. So I started doing that, and I started this book and fleshed it out and just wrote it and had it illustrated with AI, which was great. And it's now available on Amazon. It's called the Picture Portal Trilogies. And the first book is called The Day the Picture Spoke. And I had a kid tested to make sure that it would engage them. And it's for kids between the ages of 10 and 13. And I just finished the trilogy. So I did it as an ebook because I wanted it to be relatively inexpensive. And then I had people say to me, "Well, do you have a paper version of this?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't planning to." And because it's color, and I said it's very expensive to produce print on demand. And I said it could be anywhere between $22 and $25 a book. Who's going to spend that on a kid's book? So here I was approached by a colleague of mine who had read it, the first ebook, and said, "This is wonderful." And he said, "I'd like to buy it for my grandchildren." He said, "You have it in paper?" And I said, "No." And he said, "No." I said, "Listen, John, this is what it would cost." He goes, "I don't care. I get it for my grandchildren." I said, "All right, let me look into it." So I looked into it, and in 2 weeks I had them with covers and ready and formatted, and now they're in paper. So
Right.
I don't waste time. I get stuff done. So then I get these out there. Now I'm invested in these characters, and I want to know, well, what are they going to do next? I wound up writing just 2 more books over the past week or so with these characters and who they engage with, and I have had so much fun. I never knew I could, because the kind of books that I have written in the past have been business books, statistical books, stuff like, you don't need to take melatonin or smoke marijuana to go to bed. You read one of these books I wrote in those days, and they'll put you right to sleep.
Yes. I love this journey for you, and I'll definitely check them out. For everybody listening, we're going to link all of this in the show notes. So if you didn't catch it, don't worry. We'll make it available to you and you'll be able to access it. Elizabeth, it was such a joy having you here. I'm very grateful to have you. And usually, when we're wrapping up the conversation, I usually ask my guests to leave a golden nugget or a few golden nuggets for our listeners. We have listeners around the world, around the globe, and you've said a lot of useful things. But, what is the one thing that, or a few things that you love our listeners to walk away with?
Well, I can't take credit for this, and this was a statement that I made from my dear colleague, Mark Goulston, who passed away about a year ago, and he wrote a book called Just Listen. And his key thing was be more interested than interesting, because that helps to establish relationships. And part of this whole networking thing, one of the things that I teach the Navy SEALs and others to do, they have part of their program is to develop relationships with other people so that they can explore to find out. They don't know what they don't know. So how do you get people to tell you about their jobs and about themselves? So I think the thing is to reach out, and when you're meeting new people, learn as much about them before you meet them so that you can identify areas of commonality and ask them about their interests. Because then when you do that, you create bonds and you create oxytocin, that bonding hormone or chemical that goes on in your body that allows them to be open. And then when you're asking people questions, be careful about how you ask them so it doesn't come across as a demand or an interrogation. You just may say something about, "Gee, I'm interested in the fact that you did this in your career. Could you tell me how that happened for you?" By asking you, "Could you tell me?" is a way of asking for permission as opposed to "tell me about." Because "tell me about" sounds like a demand. Could you tell me about? Could you share with me? that comes across as asking for permission again, helping to reduce defenses and allows them to be more open with you.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing this work by your friend. Be interested, not interesting. Wow, that's deep stuff in a society where we love talking about ourselves or establishing our status. What is that doing in reverse to the relationship you're trying to build? That is such a powerful statement. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for having me as your guest. It was a pleasure. I hope that I could
Thank you
add
for
some
being
value to your listeners and that they can walk away with something that will be meaningful for them, something they
Yes,
can use in their life in the future. That's always my goal.
absolutely. You added value. And this podcast came out of not frustration, but frustration. I needed a space like this. I needed a space where I could learn and grow as an entrepreneur, as somebody in corporate. There was no podcast at the time that really had experts come on and talk about how they navigated their journey. Other than the social media gurus, and you often see the success, but not the journey. So I needed a platform that had people of all walks of life, all level of expertise, who were willing to tell their real story about their journey, because the real story is not always pretty. And somebody in the trenches right now who feels like I'm losing my mind, I'm doing my best. Has anybody ever experienced this? To hear somebody else's journey that, hey, I've been there, you can make it out and keep at it. Or maybe adjust here, maybe do this. And we talk about how people present. We don't always have that mirror. Yes, you're confident, you sure of yourself, but what else are you doing that might, put people off? So having these kinds of conversations are very important to me. It adds value to our listeners. And yes, I'm very grateful for you making time to be here, Elizabeth.
It was
And
my
thank you
pleasure.
again.
It was my pleasure. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And please, we'll make everything available in the show notes. And we would love to hear your feedback on this episode. So please reach out. Go and check out Elizabeth. And where can they find you? Let's say that. Where can anybody find you? If anybody's curious about you, what you do, where can they find you
You can
in
find
the
me
world?
always on my website, which is Elizabeth Fried, and my last name is spelled like fried, FRIED.com. And then if you want to know, that takes you to the modeling one. But if you go /medium, it will take you directly to the medium, although you can get to medium through some drop downs or whatever. And then if you're interested in the coaching, then you just want to go to executivecoachingfirms.com. That site I'm gonna probably take down because, I'm not really marketing anymore. I'll do one a year is what I've committed myself
Right.
to. And then you can find me on LinkedIn under, I think Elizabeth Fried, just under Elizabeth Fried. I think Instagram under first initial N, Elizabeth Fried. So that's how you can find me.
Beautiful. And we'll make all of that available, and you can click in and discover Elizabeth. So thank you, everybody, again for listening, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Avik Beck's podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It really helps us out. We'd love to hear your thoughts and continue the discussion. So join us on social media or drop us a message. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and keep pushing the boundaries of your world.